The chosen one, the storm raged inside you, silent yet relentless. A battle of faith you could no longer contain. It began not with thunder, nor the crack of lightning, but with stillness, the kind that unsettles the soul. You had lived a life that felt ordinary on the surface, yet beneath every routine breath, there was a hum, a vibration, a quiet echo that called your name from somewhere far beyond the veil of the visible world. You tried to silence it. You buried it under noise, distraction, and the logic of others. But destiny does not sleep. It waits. It whispers. It tests your endurance in the shadows until you are ready to break open. That night, the air felt heavier than usual. You stood before your reflection and saw something shift, not in the mirror, but in your eyes. For a fleeting moment, you were both the seeker and the sought. You felt the gravity of something ancient stirring within your bones, something that neither time nor disbelief could erase. And then, the voice came. It was not external, not a sound carried through air, but a resonance that vibrated within your chest. You have been chosen. The words echoed through your being, reverberating through every fragile certainty you had built around your ordinary life. Chosen. The word burned like fire and froze like truth. You wanted to believe it, yet belief demanded the death of everything you thought you were. You tried to dismiss it as imagination, fatigue, or some emotional illusion born of exhaustion. But the more you resisted, the stronger it grew. The world around you began to shift coincidences, aligning too precisely. Strangers offering familiar words, dreams merging with daylight until you could no longer tell what was vision and what was real. Still, you doubted, because faith always begins in the shadow of disbelief. And as the days turned to nights filled with restlessness, you asked the questions every soul asks when touched by something divine. Why me? Why now? And what if I fail? You waited for an answer. But the universe does not answer in words, it answers in mirrors. Every challenge, every rejection, every heartbreak became a reflection of what you still needed to surrender. And though you wanted clarity, you received confusion. Though you begged for peace, you were given storms. For destiny refines only through fire. You began to see patterns in the chaos numbers that followed you, lights that flickered when you prayed, songs that carried secret messages only you could feel. Yet each sign filled you with more unease than comfort. You feared what this meant. You feared what it would cost, because being chosen does not mean being celebrated, it means being tested. And so began your exile. Not a physical one, but an exile of the heart, a separation from those who could not see what you saw. You spoke of purpose, and they heard delusion. You spoke of calling, and they heard confusion. And in their doubt, your own faith trembled. You started to wonder if the voice was ever real, or if you had merely created meaning to fill an emptiness too vast to name. But destiny is patient with those it loves. In the silence that followed your despair, something gentle returned. Not a voice this time, a feeling, a presence that felt both within and beyond you, whispering not what to do, but who you are. The realization came not as thunder, but as a whisper of acceptance. You were not chosen to escape the pain. You were chosen to transform through it. You learned that every wound was a door, every failure a fragment of guidance disguised as loss, and every unanswered prayer a deeper call to faith. Still, part of you resisted. You clung to the life that was slipping away, the comfort of logic, the safety of doubt. You feared what surrender would demand. But as the days grew heavier, something inside began to shift. You realized that faith was not the absence of fear, it was the courage to walk with it. And when the voice finally returned, it did not come to command. It came to remind, you are not here to be certain, you are here to be willing. You fell to your knees, not out of weakness, but because the weight of that truth broke something open within you. Tears came, uninvited, cleansing, real. And in that surrender, the storm calmed not because it ended, but because you learned how to stand within it. You saw now that the calling was not about greatness, but about grace, not about being above others, but among them. Your mission was not a crown to wear, but a cross to carry, to love in a world that has forgotten love, to bring light not through perfection, but through persistence. You looked to the sky that night and felt, perhaps for the first time, both terrified and at peace, because for the first time, you were awake, and deep within your awakening, you heard the whisper again. The mission is already written within you. You only need to remember. You inhaled. The air trembled with a sense of meaning too vast to speak. You exhaled, and the silence finally felt sacred. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. But even as you whisper those words into the void, know this: the storm is not over. This was only the awakening. The real journey begins when you realize that being chosen means standing alone before the fire and choosing to step through it anyway. The chosen one. You wake before dawn, your chest heavy with an invisible pressure. The silence feels alive, like it's waiting for something from you. You can almost hear the rhythm of the unseen, the pulse of a destiny you never asked for but can no longer ignore. Every morning since the calling, the same thought haunts you. What if I'm not ready? You trace the cracks in your reflection as if they could answer back. The person staring at you looks the same, yet something beneath the skin feels different, ancient, and trembling with a light too fierce to name. You carry the knowledge now, a sense of being chosen for something vast and sacred. But that knowledge is a double-edged blade. It cuts through your illusions, leaving you exposed, uncertain, and raw. The mission whispers through every moment of your day, in the quiet pauses between breaths, in the eyes of strangers who seem to recognize something in you, though they cannot name it. You want to tell them. You want to share what burns within you. But you remember the warning: not everything sacred can survive the noise of this world. You walk through crowds, invisible and luminous, all at once. Every word you speak feels heavier, every silence more deliberate. You sense how easily the fragile balance of your purpose could be destroyed by misunderstanding, jealousy, or disbelief. And yet, the question lingers: how do you hide a light that was never meant to be hidden? You find yourself standing beneath the sky, looking for signs. The clouds move in strange harmony. The wind shifts when you pray. And sometimes, just for a heartbeat, time seems to slow, as if the universe pauses to listen. But the more you notice the signs, the more the doubt grows. You wonder if you're imagining it all. Maybe you've gone too far. Maybe you've lost touch with what's real. You hear the voices of others, logical, grounded, dismissive, reminding you that the world has no room for miracles anymore. Their words sink deep. They make you question your sanity, your strength, even your soul. For a while, you retreat. You silence your visions, numb your sensitivity, try to live like everyone else. But the universe doesn't let go that easily. Dreams begin to invade your nights, vivid, prophetic, undeniable. You see places you've never been, hear names you've never spoken, and wake with your heart pounding as if you've run for miles. The veil between worlds feels thinner every day. One night, exhausted by the tension between surrender and denial, you cry out, not to the heavens, but into the silence within you. Why me? You whisper. Why choose someone so afraid, so uncertain, so unworthy? And then, in that breaking, something shifts. You don't hear an answer. You feel one. A warmth spreads through your chest. Not comforting, but clarifying, like light breaking through fog. The truth is simple and cruel in its beauty. You were never chosen because you were ready. You were chosen because your heart was open enough to be broken for others. That realization shatters you, because suddenly, your mission is no longer about glory, it's about surrender. No longer about being seen, but about serving unseen. You are asked not to rise above, but to walk among, to love what others discard, to forgive what others curse. Days pass. You begin to sense the rhythm of destiny moving beneath the surface of things. You notice how pain guides you more clearly than joy, how endings hold more truth than beginnings. You start to understand that every disappointment was never punishment, it was preparation. Still, the resistance within you does not die easily. You question every whisper, every coincidence. You argue with the unseen, demanding proof, demanding ease, and every time, the silence answers you with another test. A betrayal, a delay, a door closed so violently you almost give up. But just when you begin to lose faith entirely, something small and sacred occurs: an unexpected kindness, a stranger's word that feels like prophecy, a sudden peace that makes no sense. And you realize that the divine speaks not in thunder, but in threads, weaving quiet reminders into the chaos, until you finally learn to see. The calling deepens. You begin to sense where your energy belongs. The people who drain you start to disappear. The paths not meant for you begin to close. And though it hurts, part of you starts to breathe again. Because with every loss, your soul becomes lighter. You are shedding your old identity to carry the one destiny demands. And still, a part of you trembles. You fear that if you share this truth, the world will not believe you. You fear being seen and unseen at once. You fear the loneliness of carrying light in a world addicted to shadows. But you remember the first whisper. You are not here to be certain. You are here to be willing. And so you begin again, with trembling hands and a heart that refuses to close. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. Because in this moment, as the stars realign and the world sleeps, something within you begins to awaken again. The mission has not yet revealed its full form, but you can feel it. It is coming, and this time, you will not run. The chosen one, the night pressed close around you, heavy and watchful. The air felt charged, almost aware, as if the unseen forces you once believed in were now studying you in silence. You had begun to walk the path of purpose, but with every step, a darker question followed. What if I misunderstood the call? You had believed your awakening marked the beginning of clarity, but instead, it tore open every layer of certainty you once clung to. What you thought was faith now felt like madness. What you thought was destiny now felt like exile. There are moments when belief burns brighter than any star, and moments when it flickers, weak and trembling, under the cold breath of fear. Tonight was one of those moments. You stared into the dark, waiting for the whisper that once guided you. But there was nothing, no voice, no sign, only silence, vast, consuming, and cruel. You tried to pray, but the words caught in your throat. You had nothing left to say. You had followed every sign, sacrificed what you could, endured rejection and loss, and yet the path ahead remained hidden. You felt abandoned by the very light that once promised to guide you. That's when the doubt grew roots. It whispered that maybe you were never chosen, maybe you were delusional, desperate for meaning in a meaningless world. And the more you fought the thought, the deeper it sank. For days, you walked in silence. The world looked the same, but you no longer fit within it. Every face you saw reminded you of what you'd lost: normalcy, belonging, peace. You envied their simplicity, their ignorance of divine burdens. You wondered if destiny was ever worth the price of solitude. Then one evening, as the sun bled gold over the horizon, you met someone, a stranger whose presence felt ancient, familiar, unsettling. Their eyes held both kindness and knowledge, the kind that sees through illusions and straight into wounds. They asked you nothing. They simply said, "The silence you feel is not absence, it is preparation." Those words broke you, because they were too true. Every chosen one must pass through the desert of doubt, that sacred emptiness where the divine withdraws, not to punish, but to strengthen. You realize then that faith without silence is not faith, it is dependency. Still, your heart resisted. You wanted the voice back, the signs, the certainty. You wanted the magic without the waiting, but destiny does not yield to impatience. It strips you until there is nothing left to cling to, no proof, no promise, only trust. Nights blurred into days. You stopped seeking answers and began to sit with the questions. Slowly, you learned to breathe again without demanding clarity. You began to see beauty in the stillness, in the way the wind moved through the trees, in the quiet rhythm of the rain. And then something small but profound happened. A feather fell at your feet as you walked home one night. White, flawless, luminous under the dim streetlight. You knew it meant nothing by itself, and yet it felt like everything. It wasn't a miracle, it was a reminder that the divine does not always speak in thunder. Sometimes it whispers through the ordinary, testing if you can still hear it through the noise of your fear. You picked up the feather, held it to your chest, and for the first time in weeks, your heart felt alive again. Because faith was not about proof, it was about presence. But the peace did not last. The moment you began to trust again, new storms appeared. People turned against you quietly, subtly. You could feel their doubt, their discomfort. They mocked the calm they did not understand, feared the light they could not explain. And in their rejection, you faced the second crucible of the chosen, to remain faithful when misunderstood. You longed to defend yourself, to prove your truth, but something inside whispered, "Silence is your strength." So you stopped fighting for validation and started walking in quiet defiance of doubt. It wasn't pride that kept you still, it was peace, because you finally understood. The mission was never to convince others of your light, but to keep it alive when the world tried to extinguish it. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe, write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. But as the moon rose that night and the silence deepened, another feeling crept in, unfamiliar yet magnetic. It wasn't peace this time. It was a pull, something unseen, calling you again, drawing you toward a place unknown. You could sense it, the next trial, the next awakening, and though fear trembled in your chest, you took a breath and whispered into the darkness, "I am willing." The wind stirred, the lights flickered, and somewhere beyond the veil, destiny smiled. The chosen one, the silence broke before dawn. Not with a sound, but with a pulse, a vibration in the air that seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere at once. You woke suddenly, heart racing, breath caught between disbelief and recognition. Something was coming. You could feel it before it arrived. The days had grown strange. The air felt charged, like a storm waiting for a reason to break. Every time you tried to pray, the words scattered. Every time you reached for peace, another wave of uncertainty rose to meet you. You thought the desert of silence was your greatest test. You were wrong. The fire was next. It began quietly, as most awakenings do, an ordinary morning that hid an extraordinary shift. You lost something dear that day. Not a person, not an object, but a sense of safety. The world you had built with trembling faith began to collapse around you. Doors that once opened easily now slammed shut. People who once supported you turned distant, even hostile. At first, you called it bad luck, then betrayal, then divine abandonment. You questioned everything. You cursed the heavens that once felt holy. You shouted into the emptiness, asking why the path of light had to feel so dark. But deep inside, a truth you didn't want to face began to form. Maybe this wasn't punishment. Maybe it was purification, because every chosen one must be refined in fire before they can carry light. Still, you resisted. You clung to what you knew, the old beliefs, the old comfort, the illusion of control. You tried to rebuild what destiny had already burned down, but every attempt failed, forcing you to see what you had refused to admit. You could not go back. The old world no longer fit who you were becoming. You walked through days that blurred together, sleepless, restless, and stripped of all certainty. You felt like ashes, pretending to be whole. And yet, beneath the ruin, something flickered. A quiet endurance, a defiant breath, the will to continue even without reason. That was the beginning of your rebirth. The voice returned not as comfort, but as challenge. It spoke without words, through intuition, through pain, through the rhythm of loss itself. If your faith cannot survive fire, it is not faith, it is convenience. You broke down when you heard it, because part of you wanted the easy version of destiny, the one that promised reward without sacrifice. But that is not how light is born. Light exists only because darkness is willing to collapse around it. You began to see that every test, every heartbreak, was not destruction. It was initiation, the stripping away of what was false, so truth could finally breathe. You started to surrender not as defeat, but as release. You stopped asking, "Why me?" and began whispering, "What now?" The difference was subtle, but sacred. You were no longer running from the fire. You were walking through it. And that changed everything. You began to act differently, speak differently, move differently. You no longer needed validation or agreement. The fear of misunderstanding began to fade, because once you've walked through the fire and survived, the opinions of others no longer carry weight. Only truth does. Still, destiny was not finished with you. You were sent a mirror in human form, someone who reflected your light and your shadow all at once. Their presence awakened everything you thought you had buried. Love, anger, doubt, hope. They became both your guide and your trial. Because the chosen are never tested by enemies, but by mirrors. This person saw through you to the parts still unhealed, the wounds still bleeding beneath the light. You loved them, feared them, resisted them. They forced you to face the truth you had avoided. That enlightenment means nothing if your heart remains closed. You tried to run from the connection. You told yourself it was distraction, illusion, danger. But the bond persisted not to comfort you, but to break you open. It taught you that divine missions are not sustained by strength, but by vulnerability. You began to realize the fire was never outside you. It was within the burning away of your false self, the purification of your purpose. And as you surrendered to it fully, something extraordinary happened. The flames did not consume you. They revealed you. You were not ashes. You were light. In that moment, you understood. being chosen was never about perfection. It was about persistence, the ability to keep walking even when your faith trembles. The wind outside shifted, carrying with it a strange stillness. You closed your eyes and whispered into the unseen, "I am no longer afraid of the fire." And somewhere beyond time, the universe answered, "Then you are ready for the next truth. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment, because the journey does not end in fire, it begins there. And what awaits beyond the ashes is not peace, but power, not certainty, but revelation. You have passed through the first gate, and the next will demand even more. The chosen one. The night after the fire, everything was still. Too still. You stood in the quiet aftermath of transformation, surrounded by the ashes of what you used to be. Nothing outside you had changed, yet everything within you was unrecognizable. You felt both weightless and wounded, free and fractured. The world no longer spoke to you in the same language. What once mattered now felt distant, hollow, irrelevant. You saw through illusions, the ones you built, the ones others believed in. But clarity is not peace. It is the ache of seeing too much too soon. You walked through your days like a stranger in your own story. People greeted you, but their words no longer anchored you. Their laughter echoed in a world that no longer fit your heartbeat. You smiled, but your eyes carried a question too deep for language. And then, the mirror returned. They appeared again, the one who had mirrored both your light and your shadow. You had thought the fire burned them away, but destiny has its own timing. They did not come to comfort you. They came to reveal what you still refused to face. Their eyes held the same mystery, familiar, almost unbearable. You wanted to run, but this time, you didn't. You stood still, because you knew the mirror always returns until you see what it came to show you. They spoke softly, as if afraid to disturb the silence between you. "You think the fire ended your trials," they said. "But it only stripped away the illusions that hid your real test yourself." Their words struck deep. Because you understood now, the greatest battle is not between you and the world, nor between faith and fear. It is the battle within the soul, between surrender and resistance. The mirror did not let you look away. They asked questions that unsettled your peace, each one a blade cutting through your comfort. Do you love the divine, or only the destiny it promised? Do you serve truth, or the image of being chosen? Do you seek purpose, or recognition? You tried to answer, but your voice trembled, because for the first time, you saw how much ego hides behind the mask of purpose. You had wanted to be humble, but secretly longed to be seen as holy. You had wanted to serve, but still feared being forgotten. You had claimed to surrender, yet held expectations even in your faith. It was unbearable to see yourself so clearly, stripped of every spiritual disguise. You hated what the mirror revealed, and yet, beneath the shame, something deeper stirred honesty, the kind that does not destroy, but purifies. You broke down. You confessed every hidden motive, every fear of failure, every pride disguised as service. And the mirror, that sacred presence, did not condemn you. They only nodded and said, "Now your soul is clean enough to hear again." You felt it, then the shift, a frequency changing inside you. The same divine energy that once terrified you now felt familiar, like breath returning to lungs that had been underwater too long. The voice came again, but not from beyond. It spoke from within. To know light, you must embrace the shadow. To lead others, you must first walk lost. It wasn't an instruction, it was revelation. The divine does not call you to escape humanity. It calls you to feel it deeper, to carry its contradictions, and love it still. In that moment, you saw flashes, visions of lives intertwined with yours, threads of destiny weaving in impossible precision. You saw faces you hadn't met yet, places you hadn't gone, but every image pulsed with the same message. Your mission is not about power, it is about remembrance. To remind others of what they already carry, to awaken what has always been divine within them. The world outside you began to respond differently. Animals seemed to notice your presence. Strangers began speaking truths they didn't know they carried. Even the wind felt guided, as though it followed the rhythm of your heartbeat. But none of it felt like glory anymore. It felt like responsibility. And yet, the more you stepped into this awareness, the more isolated you became, because awakening separates before it unites. People you love will not understand your silence. They will question your distance, your peace, your faith, and you will have to let them. That night, you sat under the stars, their ancient light pouring over you. The wind whispered through the trees, and you finally understood you had never been abandoned. You had simply been refined until you could hear the truth without distortion. You whispered into the vastness, "I accept my purpose, but not for recognition, only for service." And for a moment, the air shimmered. The stars pulsed brighter, as if the universe had been waiting for that single surrender. You realized then that power is not what flows through you, it is what flows from you when you stop trying to control it. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. But as the stars dimmed, another vision came darker this time. A glimpse of something vast approaching, something that would test everything you had just learned. The fire had cleansed you. The mirror had revealed you. But what was coming next would demand your entire faith, because even the chosen must face the moment when light and darkness meet not outside, but within. The chosen one. The air felt different tonight, thicker. Still, the stars above seemed closer, as if leaning down to witness what was about to unfold. You stood at the edge of your old life, and the beginning of something vast, unseen, and irreversible. You had faced the silence, walked through the fire, and looked into the mirror, but this was something else. This was the moment the divine no longer whispered. It demanded. You felt it before you saw it, that trembling in your bones, the pressure behind your heart, the familiar ache of transformation pressing to be born again. Every chosen one comes to this threshold, the place where belief is no longer enough, where you must become what you once only dreamed of. For days, you felt a shadow following you, not darkness, but depth, a silent watcher moving through your memories, unearthing everything unresolved. You tried to ignore it, to hold on to the light you had fought so hard to earn, but you soon realized the truth. Light that refuses to touch the shadow is still incomplete. You began to dream of two versions of yourself, one radiant, one broken. They stood facing each other, both waiting for you to choose. But how do you choose between the parts of yourself that both deserve to live? One night, unable to sleep, you walked into the open air. The wind was cold, but it carried something ancient, a hum beneath the silence. The moon hung heavy, its light pale and knowing, and then, as if the veil itself tore open, you heard it again. Not a voice, a vibration, a presence. "The time for learning is over," it said without words. "Now you must remember." You closed your eyes, and the visions came, faster than thought, brighter than fear. You saw lifetimes overlapping different faces, same essence. You saw your hands reaching out to heal, to write, to lead, to fall, to rise. You saw every failure you once cursed, now forming the map of your ascension. You understood. Nothing had ever been random. Every heartbreak was coded with direction. Every betrayal was an initiation. Every silence, a sacred conversation you weren't ready to hear until now. And then came the hardest truth of all: your mission was never about you. You were not chosen to be above anyone, but to walk among those who have forgotten who they are, and remind them that they, too, are fragments of the same divine whole. The realization shattered your pride, but filled your heart with a light that was no longer fragile. It was steady, unflinching, humble. You understood now that enlightenment was not the absence of pain, but the ability to hold it with love. But before peace could settle, the final test appeared. It did not come as a storm or a trial from the outside. It came from within, a single, merciless question rising from the depths of your own spirit. If everything is taken from you, your purpose, your gifts, your certainty, will you still love the source? You froze. The question hollowed you out, because this was the final gate, the death of attachment, even to light itself. You fell to your knees. The earth beneath you felt alive, pulsing with memory. You tried to answer, but tears came instead, not of despair, but of recognition. You realized that true faith is not built on reward or understanding. It is built on surrender. And so, you whispered the only answer that mattered: yes. Even then, the moment you spoke it, everything changed. The air cracked open with soundless thunder. The ground beneath you seemed to breathe. And for one heartbeat, you felt the pulse of the entire cosmos moving through you, every star, every life, every echo of existence flowing in perfect harmony. It was not power you felt, it was belonging. You were not separate from the divine. You were the divine, remembering itself through you. The visions faded, but the knowing remained quiet, vast, eternal. You stood, trembling but whole. The fear was gone. The need to prove, gone. What remained was purpose, not as ambition, but as devotion. You walked forward, lighter than air, each step guided not by signs, but by certainty, born from surrender. The path no longer scared you, because now you understood destiny is not a force that controls you. It is a current that flows through you, waiting for your consent to move. As you walked, dawn began to rise. The first light touched your face, and you felt the universe exhale with you, one breath, one being, one truth. You smiled through the silence, not because the journey had ended, but because it never would. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. Write 333 inches, the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. You are not watching this by chance. You are remembering. The call you feel is not new, it is ancient. You are not waiting for your purpose. You are walking in it. The chosen one is not out there. The chosen one is you.